Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Debrief live on the Blood Red channel. We're coming to you following Liverpool's 3-1 win at Anfield over West Ham United. I mean, it was sort of a typically slow start, as we've seen from Liverpool this season. West Ham giving us a couple of early scares. We've just spoken about Jarrod Bowen's header, the one that he missed, had us all a bit heart in mouth. It could have been another comeback job, but Liverpool, I mean, took the lead through probably the most Stonewall penalty we'll see all year.
Yeah, it was definitely a pen, wasn't it? And it did change the game, didn't it? West Ham had started well. I thought Liverpool did start slowly, but obviously get themselves a goal in front. And it was a good performance in the end. I think second half they controlled it a lot better. That's what you would have wanted. But the centre-backs were dominant. Szoboszlai was brilliant again. And Liverpool have won 3-1 again. I think that's 3 games in a row, isn't it, where they've won 3-1. So a popular scoreline. I'm sure we might see a few more of those as well, because it does feel like this team will concede every now and again. But the goals, the chances that they created it was a good victory and an important one. I think West Ham, similar to Villa, I think a few weeks ago, it could have been a lot more tricky than what it was, but it's definitely promising that Liverpool were able to win it fairly comfortably in the end.
Yeah, as you say, another 3-1 win. Thankfully, this one not having to come from behind as we did against Lask in midweek. Obviously, I think the main thing going into the game for me, we've spoken on this channel across a few podcasts in the last week about how Liverpool's system, it didn't really work without Trent, with Gomez in that inverted fullback role against Wolves. Obviously, he wasn't quite as central today. He was pushed out wider a little bit more. So, do you think that system, it needs to be tweaked if Trent obviously isn't playing, which he wasn't today? Do you think that is a system that Liverpool can really only play if they've got Trent Alexander-Arnold on the pitch with how unique of a player he is?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see a little bit more of Stefan Bajcetic in that position, to be honest. I think he's got the skill set to do it. I don't think it's really fair to judge him in a team where Liverpool have made 11 changes and he'd come back after 5 or 6 months out injured. So I'd be interested to see that again. But I think you're right. In terms of Joe Gomez, it doesn't ever look natural. There was, I suppose, as the game wore on, he became more of a wide player. They did try and play him in that little inverted position. Early on in the game, there was a couple of moments where it looked a little bit ropey. He managed to get out of a couple of little corners that he boxed himself into. I mean, to be fair, we have seen Trent do that a couple of times as well. There's been games this season where he's lost the ball in tricky positions from doing that role. So it's not an easy position to be able to fill. But I think it worked well enough for Liverpool. I thought Joe Gomez was really, really good today. And that's not necessarily, doing the same things as Trent, but he was, really solid. He helped out with Matip in terms of the physicality that West Ham have got. Every opportunity they were basically just lumping the ball up to Michail Antonio, and he was positioning himself as far away as possible from Van Dijk. So obviously it comes over to that side a lot of times. But I think that's the biggest thing that you want, really. You almost can make an argument, I think, in a game like that Gomez was maybe even a better option than Trent. Liverpool didn't necessarily need the creativity. They created loads of chances anyway, but obviously helps out with the defending, the set pieces, the long balls that West Ham play. So I think it was a really good performance from him and from Matip as well, to be fair. So it's obviously a very different way of playing that position. They did try it a little bit, as I mentioned, in the first half, but I think we've come to a point now where I'm not worried where I see Joe Gomez on the pitch, where there were times last season where I was. I think at the moment he's in a really good vein of form, and hopefully that can continue. We don't know exactly, obviously, when Trent's going to be back, but even if he doesn't play right back, he is going to be needed for centre back in the rotations for Europa League, possibly for midweek as well. Though maybe the fact that Konate didn't play, maybe he'll come in for the Leicester game. But I think there's definitely real promise there with him. It's just a case now of, can he stay fit for the full season, because he is definitely a player that tends to pick up these injuries, and the momentum can easily be halted. So yeah, I'm excited for him. I'm pleased for him that he's starting to put together these performances, and I think he was definitely one of the ones that stood out most to me today.
Yeah, Matip and Gomez coped really well on that right-hand side, I thought. But it was a Premier League return for the skipper, Virgil van Dijk. I wanted to get your thoughts on his performance. Could have maybe done a little bit better for Bowen's header, but it was a great header right in the corner, and probably wasn't expecting him to attempt a diving header with the ball being that low. Maybe was expecting him to try and volley it, and maybe could have got a block off. I think there was a corner as well in the second half where Bowen got up and I mean, should have tested Alisson better a bit. I think Van Dijk maybe could have done a bit better there as well. But what did you think of his return to the Premier League? Do you think he brought a bit more composure at the back for Liverpool?
Yeah, I mean, it's never going to be a bad thing, is it? I think you've got to give them a little bit of slack against a team like West Ham when you've got James Ward-Prowse on the corners. He's always going to, give you a bit of a harm. That the biggest thing really is that Liverpool did, in the main, manage to avoid giving away too many silly free kicks. There was a Robertson one that looked a little bit harsh when he was in the corner. There was the one where the ball nearly went over Alisson and he headed it out for a corner. That was, a little bit of a worrying moment. But generally speaking, the best way of stopping Ward-Prowse is to just not give away that many set pieces. And I thought Liverpool did that quite well. The ones that they did give away, obviously, they did have a couple of little problems. And maybe if Bowen had been a little bit more clinical, we might be talking about it in a slightly different way. But I think, for Van Dijk, it's been a good start to the season. Again, he's another one that I think last season there was a few moments where he just got himself into a bit of a groove where he just wasn't quite himself. He didn't quite look, his usual self in terms of the performances he was putting in, the levels of confidence, even simple things like the passing and his ability to switch the play and things like that. So I think the start to the season has been, generally speaking, very good. I was a little bit unlucky, obviously, with the red card. But I think I've seen enough from him to think that he's made a step up from last season. Again, he was another one that you were a little bit worried in terms of the form and the way that he was playing, but definitely that isn't the case now. And again, you just want to see him similar to Gomez. You just want a little bit of a run from him now. I think it's the same really for a number of these players. If they can just get that consistency, if he performs as he did today for the rest of this season, I think Liverpool will be all right. So, yeah, I'm not at all concerned about him now. But I think there were times last season where you worried if he would get back to his best. I think he's definitely, answered those questions to say the least.
Yeah, we'll move on to talk about the midfield now. Then Alexis Mac Allister, once again, the furthest man back out of that midfield three. I mean, I think we've spoken again across a number of podcasts on this channel that it's probably not where he wants to be, probably not where he envisioned himself playing when he did join Liverpool. But I think he allows us to do so much more as a midfield unit than when we've got Endo in there. Obviously, we've got a relatively small sample size of having Endo in that number 6. But, I mean, you look at just a few of his highlights from the game. Mac Allister, there's a great tackle on Jarrod Bowen in the first half in the box where looked like he could end up giving away a penalty but managed to get the ball. And I mean, that ball for Nunez's goal was just stupendous, wasn't it? So do you think Klopp, do you think he's going to persist with Alexis Mac Allister in this number 6 role for now, at least until we see Endo make a bit more of an impact in that role?
Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, is it? And like you say, it's not the role that he thought he probably would have been coming in to play. Obviously, the fact that Liverpool went big for Moises Caicedo in the summer suggests that it's not the role that they thought he was going to play either. He is much better further forward, but I think it's undoubtedly the case at the moment that, him with Jones and Szoboszlai is the best 3 that Liverpool have got. I think Ryan Gravenberch made a decent appearance off the bench again. I think Harvey Elliott has done well this season, but for me, it's quite clear that the 3 that started today are the number 1 3. I think you could see even today when Wataru Endo comes off the bench, he gets caught out of position a couple of times. He's just not very fast, is he? I think ultimately his physicality is just not there to play on his own. Maybe you can play him in a 2 and maybe go for a bit of a 4-2-3-1 type thing with him in there. But I'd be very concerned, I think, if he'd have started today, I think Liverpool would have had a lot more problems. And it's not a natural position for Mac Allister. Again, there was, a couple of moments where he maybe got himself the wrong side of the ball or maybe throws in a tackle where he didn't need to and things like that. But it's not perfect, and Liverpool do need a bit of a long-term solution. But I think it's almost better for the 3 of them. Imagine Liverpool had got Caicedo, for example, trying to fit Jones, Mac Allister and Szoboszlai into those 2 positions would have been very tricky as well. So I think it's probably not a bad thing for him. He obviously had the poor game or the poor half until he was took off last week, but I think that was definitely a one-off. Again, I've got no concerns about him. I think if Liverpool can keep the 3 of those players in midfield fit for this season, we're going to see a huge upside in terms of that. Szoboszlai was the best of the 3 for me today, but Mac Allister, obviously the pass, a few other moments as well. He's a player that I'm excited about, and I think we will see more of him when he gets to play further forward. We'll see, another level. But absolutely no doubt about it. He's a much better footballer than Endo is at this moment in time. And I would be worried to see Endo. I'm not at all worried to see McAllister in that position at the moment.
Yeah, as you say, Szoboszlai, the standout in that midfield three again. I mean, like you said, Jones, McAllister probably do make up alongside Szoboszlai that ideal midfield three for the Premier League for Jurgen Klopp. But Szoboszlai at this point certainly feels like the one who really has nailed down his place in this Liverpool 2.0 midfield, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's brilliant, isn't he? He barely gave the ball away. He was creating things. I think he created 4 chances. He was just popping up all over the pitch. I think him and Curtis Jones were excellent in terms of the pressing and just the intelligence, really. They obviously work really hard and they run. And, you know, at times last season, there were Liverpool players, Darwin Nunez probably the obvious one, where you could see that the desire was there, but maybe the intelligence and the selective, you know, ability to know when to go and when to just leave it just wasn't there. But Szoboszlai has come in straight away and looks perfectly suited to playing in that role. I think, you know, we're going to see a lot more of him in terms of his attacking contributions. I think we've seen a little bit of a glimpse of that. I think there's still more to be unlocked, but the promising thing really is that he just looks a complete contrast to what Liverpool had in midfield last season. He can run forever. He's quick, he's strong, he's tall, he's everything that you want from a player in that midfield, really. So I'm hugely excited about him. I think you can tell as well that his confidence is right up there. There was a couple of flicks and tricks. He sort of backheeled the ball in the air around the corner at one point. I think, you know, if you're doing that 5 or 6 games into your Liverpool career, you've obviously made, you know, a pretty decent start. So I think he's hugely impressive. I'm not quite sure who he reminds me of. There is someone in my head, but I can't quite work out who it is. He's kind of got that sort of passing range that you'd see from maybe someone like Trent. I know he's been compared to like a De Bruyne or a Gerrard, but I don't think that's quite the player that he is. He's just so good at so many different things. I think, you know, his technique is really, really impressive. He almost takes the free kicks in that kind of Ronaldo type way, which is something to watch out for. Obviously, the ability from outside the box creates a bit of an opportunity for players running in behind. So again, you know, him and Jones together, obviously the goal that they scored and combined was ruled out for offside. But I think there's definitely, you know, a complete contrast in that midfield between the two of those two. When you compare, you know, what Liverpool had last season, purely even just in terms of their availability, you know, he's completed another 90 minutes. He seems to be able to run forever. Fingers crossed, you know, he's not shown any signs of being injury prone or picking up any knocks or anything like that. He's so robust, so quick, just everything ticks every box. And yeah, it's a surprise to me that only Liverpool and Newcastle were in for him during the summer, because I think it's early to be making these shouts, but I think he might be the signing of the summer.
Yeah, I mean, give it about 10 more games, and I think he probably will have logged as many minutes as Liverpool's previous number 8 did in his entire career. But yeah, it doesn't look like quite as injury prone as Naby Keita was. Obviously, he's just an absolute athlete, isn't he? Like you say, tireless, never stops running. But Darwin Nunez obviously starting another game up top, and I mean, it was a typical Darwin Nunez performance. Don't know how many times we've said that on this podcast, but I mean, he has that miss, obviously blazed that one wide. He had a hand in the penalty, obviously a good ball through to Diaz, who then flicked it to Salah, who was fouled. And I mean, that goal was just everything you want from a number 9. I mean, the awareness, he was barely even really making a run, but McAllister obviously spots him, chips that ball through, and it's a really clever finish. I mean, probably just about helps him keep his place as the first choice up top for the next couple Premier League games, do you think?
Yeah, and to be honest, I wouldn't mind seeing him start against Leicester midweek. I think he's in a bit of a groove now. You don't really want to take him out of the team, because I think he's one of those where I think if he's confident and he's on a bit of a scoring run, you maybe just keep him in and see what happens. I think I was a little bit worried about what might happen to him after he missed the chance, but you know, he then goes on and scores a much more difficult one. So that kind of sums him up, doesn't it? Sometimes you just get a little bit frustrated with him, but then it's not long until he does something that's really impressive. And I think that the goal was obviously a good thing, but I think you're right to mention as well that the involvement that he's had, you know, a couple of weeks in a row now, really, of just creating chances out of nothing. His hold-up play, his intelligence to be able to shrug off, and you know, the physicality. It was Craig Dawson, wasn't it, last week? I can't remember who it was, maybe Kurt Zouma or, you know, whoever it was across the West Ham back line this time, that he manages to just take the ball with them right behind them, turns them, spins them, and then plays the right pass. It's really promising, I think, to see his development. Really, I don't think that's something that we would have seen from him. We would have maybe seen the ball bounce off him, or maybe he'd have just lost it a little bit more often last season. But he's clearly, in a good vein of form. He's obviously getting used to the way that Liverpool play now. He's started the season well in terms of the goals as well. So he is starting to put together a real run of form. I think Diogo Jota and Cody Gakpo were both good off the bench. The options that Liverpool have got. Luis Diaz had a pretty good game as well. And I think, between the five of those players, there's no other team, even Manchester City, don't have the options that Liverpool have in that area. Just looked it up for a piece. Obviously, Arsenal and Spurs were both playing at the same time as Liverpool and West Ham. And you look at the options that Mikel Arteta brought on Reece Nelson in the second half. You compare that to what Liverpool have got. I mean, Harvey Elliott didn't even get on, did he? So I think there's loads of positives really for Liverpool in terms of that forward line. And at the moment, it's Darwin Nunez that's scoring the goals. At some point, I'm sure Mohamed Salah will go on a bit of a run and do that. He'd back Cody Gakpo, and we know that Diogo Jota is a bit of a streaky player as well. Luis Diaz, at some point, I think it's going to click and he's going to score more. So as long as there's one or two of them in a decent vein of form at any given time, then Liverpool will be in a decent place. And when you've got five of them to pick from, it's going to make that a hell of a lot easier, I think.
Yeah, I mean, a word on Diogo Jota off the bench, because I thought that goal just sort of perfectly encapsulates what is unique about him as an option out of that five that Liverpool have got. The ball falls to him and he's somehow got acres of space in the 6-yard box, never mind in the penalty area. Saves our nerves for the last 5 minutes. And I'm just not sure any of the other attackers in this Liverpool side would manage to get that kind of a bounce. He just always seems to find space for a shot in the box, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's so good at that, isn't he? And I felt a bit sorry for Ben Doak on Thursday, because I think Diogo Jota probably would have got him a couple of assists if he'd have been on the pitch at the time, because he was just flashing those balls across. And you just want someone like Darwin Nunez. I know Cody Gakpo did it pretty well against Wolves last weekend, but Jota's just on another level, isn't he, in terms of that anticipation, knowing where the ball's going to drop and just popping up. And again, he didn't have a huge impact in terms of when he came on. He did a couple of decent bits that were good, but gets the goal and justifies him being on the pitch. So I think it's a bit of an issue for him in that at the moment I would want to keep using him as a sub. I think he's probably more effective at the current moment in terms of coming on and being able to just grab you something from nowhere. But at some point, he's obviously going to want to add a little bit more and be able to come in from the start. Maybe he can do that against Leicester. I know he's had some fun in the past against them in terms of scoring and that sort of thing. So it'd be a big opportunity for him. I think whenever he does start, he's got to start to add a little bit more to his game and show that he can do one or two of the bits that Darwin Nunez has been doing. But I don't think you've got any concerns about any of them at the moment. I think for somebody to turn to off the bench, Liverpool in the past have had Minamino, Origi, players like that, Shaqiri. Diogo Jota is just a completely different level, isn't he? He's a brilliant footballer, and I don't think he's in the best form that he could be at the moment, but that's just really an exciting thing for what he could be for the rest of the season. He's obviously another one that you want to see stay fit, and he's not always had a perfect injury record, but I'm really, really confident about Liverpool scoring goals. If they can tighten it up at the back, then they've just got so much firepower. I think it'll be, pretty much nailed on that they'll go far this season. Whether that's in the Premier League, I don't know, but certainly in the other competitions, I think they've got a real chance of becoming a really exciting team. And I've just checked the Newcastle score and seen that they're absolutely piling them past Sheffield United. But if they can do that, then what can Liverpool do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky position for Jota to be in, because, obviously you always want to do well coming off the bench, but at the same time, you don't want to develop a reputation as a super sub, as a footballer. Obviously, it's ideal for a manager if he's got a player like that, but you want to be starting games, don't you? But it's 6 wins in a row in all competitions, 18 unbeaten, and the post-match fist pumps are back from Jurgen Klopp. Does it feel like Liverpool are building up a bit of a head of steam now, Matt?
I think so. I think the next 2 games will be interesting. Obviously, Spurs next weekend, they've got a free week as well. They're already out of the Carabao Cup, so they'll have plenty of time to recover and prepare for that. And obviously Brighton as well after that. So 2 tough away games for Liverpool coming up. But I think if you can get 4 points out of that, it really does start to look good. And Manchester City have got a couple of games that are coming up that are pretty tricky. I think Arsenal and Spurs are good, but I don't necessarily think they're as good as Liverpool or set up for the long haul. I think they will drop points here and there, largely because of the attackers, as we've spoken about. But Liverpool are in a really good position now. They've got to keep going. They've got to keep grinding out those results. But when you think of some of the games that they've already played, they've obviously drawn with Chelsea, but then they've already gone to Newcastle. I think Wolves was a tricky one. Villa and West Ham kind of in that same category of could have been tricky, but they've made it look a little bit easier. I think the signs are all there that it could be something. I'm not going to go all out and say, yeah, they're going to definitely challenge Manchester City for the title at this point, but it is looking good and the building blocks are there. We know what they need to improve on, but it's still early days. And if you're scoring 3 goals every week and you can still get better and you can still do more and you can still, find another level, I think that can only be a positive sign. So it's looking good, isn't it? I think at the very least, they'll get themselves back into the Champions League this season. And they already look a completely different team to what we saw from the majority of last year.
Yeah, starting to look like Liverpool could be back to being the best of the rest, or maybe even a little bit more. But we'll see what we do against Leicester in midweek. But that is all we've got time for here today on the debrief. So, Matt, thanks for joining me, and we'll catch you next time.